Hi, I'm Mary Liebowitz. I'm a content strategist on the Digital Services Georgia team, and I'm here today with Julie Fay, our UX analyst. Today, we're going to be talking about fostering positive user experiences across Georgia state agencies, even when, or especially when, you have an agency or content that's very broad or complex. Civic websites or government websites provide vital information to people that they use in their daily lives. And agencies that proactively organize and maintain their content allow these users to be self-sufficient and experience good customer service digitally. Civic websites allow multiple users to access information at once instead of limiting people to a one-on-one interaction. During COVID, we saw an exponential adoption of technology and digital interactions across every type of user. Globally, more people now rely on technology to maintain their everyday lives. And civic websites, as Will mentioned, don't compete with other sources of information like in the private sector. Government agencies are often a single source of truth. So they must provide people with succinct, easily understood, and easily found information. And within the Georgia Technology Authority, the digital services team works to create positive, useful, and accessible digital experiences for the people of Georgia and for Georgia's agencies' websites. We help to strengthen trust in this necessary digital communication channel and support agencies in usability and accessibility best practices and compliance. The Department of Revenue's website gets about 2 million visitors monthly. From the user perspective, they have 4 distinct divisions: taxes, motor vehicles, alcohol and tobacco, and local government services. These divisions cover very different areas and have a wide range of users that need to be connected to the right information as simply as possible, all within the same domain. And the lion's share of DOR's content management falls to Katherine Obarowski, who we'll chat with in a few minutes. And she doesn't have an easy job, but Katherine is incredibly engaged and always strives to deliver a great experience to the website's users. And we really enjoy working with her. So the DOR asked us to conduct a usability review of their website. And we know that ideally, a civic website serves 2 primary purposes. It allows people to find the information that they need, or it lets them complete a task. In a usability review, the digital services team analyzes and tests the ease with which website visitors can find information or get something done. And we want to know that the website is simple to use, people can navigate it easily, that it has credibility, meaning you can rely on the structure and hierarchy of information, that the language is consistent and easy to understand, and that there aren't any barriers to use. Sometimes when we ask organizations to think about how their website should be structured, their mind might go to how their org chart looks in a layout of teams or business areas, or their current workflows. But a person visiting your website to find information or complete a task just wants to get from point A to point B. They don't need to know which areas cover which functions and which department you need to start in to be able to get something done. And a lot of the time, the purpose and scope of the way that you refer to organizational functions isn't immediately obvious to someone else. Even in government, we don't just create websites today. We create digital experiences. We leverage what we know to be able to do this. A website contains the digital content that's important for your organization to provide to people, but it isn't just a space to store information. Your org charts and workflows exist within the organization, while a website is a manifestation of the work done by the organization where people interact with it. So civic websites especially must be user-centric. Taking this approach shapes the design and mindset around digital content so that people can find, understand, and use the information offered. So then what happens when you have an agency website with a very wide user base that includes the content of 4 very different divisions? Within the Department of Revenue, people might be trying to renew a driver's license or pay taxes, or they need to know what permission they need to serve alcohol at a charity event, or they might need to know how to request a tax credit for a movie filmed in the state of Georgia, or they have to take a 5-day course on the valuation of farm equipment as a local government employee. And it takes thoughtful and deliberate work on the back end to provide a clean and simple path to what people need. But a user-centric focus helps us to make decisions and shape people's civic digital interactions. It keeps them simple and easy to navigate and reliable in the structure and hierarchy of information. And it offers consistent, plain language and presents no barriers to use. To clarify digital content, we have to be certain it serves the right purpose and that it functions as seamlessly as possible. And so we find that less is more is the best possible approach, especially for complex agencies and content. By this, we mean really thinking content through, honing in on just a few key initial choices so that people can choose a path that makes sense for what they need and not experience immediate friction between choices. They can make a quick decision and follow that path to get to their outcome. And we might have an urge to guide people with extra helper paragraphs or create FAQs just in case, but paring down to simple structures and plain language throughout the website will help them to get things accomplished more easily. Julie Fay will now give us a more detailed look under the hood of the UX testing for this project.
Thank you, Mary. Let's take a look at how we applied these concepts she was just discussing to their website. Okay, so the 2 most important things we zeroed in on when setting up tests for DOR was both the ease in which users traveled through the site and the ease in which users found the information that they needed to complete tasks. We found out how easy or difficult things were by letting the users lead the way. We watched how users traveled through the site by looking at how they navigated through the site structure. We observed where users looked for answers on individual pages. They told us what terms and labels they look for and how they would group information into categories. Finally, we both looked at test numbers, but also listened to what users told us to find out if users could locate what they needed with confidence. Throughout the project, we kept reminding ourselves to wear user goggles and look at the website through a visitor's eyes. We kept in mind that people don't usually come to a government website just to read it and leave. Often they have a specific task they need to get done, and depending on the task or the deadline, they could be feeling heightened emotions when they visit a site. It's not enough to present the information. We want to make it easy for them to know where to go through each step of their journey and have them complete their task with ease. Now let's take a look at what tests we used to find out what users were experiencing. In a nutshell, we identified 3 types of users who visit the DOR site on a regular basis. We grouped people together for testing as general users, who we would think of as Georgia residents visiting the website, internal users, or some type of government employee looking for information, or business users. These would be business owners in Georgia who visit the website for information. We tested each of these groups in 3 types of tests: a card sort, a tree test, and a first click test. And finally, we ran 2 rounds of testing. The first was to look for any potential weak points in usability. Then we made some adjustments based on our experience and usability best practices. And then we ran a second round of tests to test our work and see how people did. So As mentioned, first, we conducted a baseline study of the current website for each group to identify strengths and opportunities for improvement. Then we gathered that data from round one and used that data to reorganize the site. And finally, we tested that reorganized site in round two, again for each group, to see if the results changed. In the round one test, we identified labels that the users preferred by asking them to tell us in their own words what they would label things in a card sort test. Here you can see we gave them a list of related topics and asked the users to create categories over there on the right. Then they could drag topics into the categories that they created. We used this data to help us do some website reorganization before the second set of tests. In both sets of tests, we gave users tasks to complete, and we identified how users traveled through the site to complete them. You can see an example of this on the right, where a user has used an interactive test that's similar to a website menu to show where they personally would go to complete a task. And finally, in both sets of tests, we gave users tasks to complete, and we identified where users clicked on an individual page to complete them. The blue dots you see here shows us where users clicked for one of the tasks. All right, so here's a quick look at what we learned over these 2 rounds of testing. Right now, you're looking at a high-level chart at how the new site reorganization scored. Now, you may remember from earlier in the presentation, the 3 audiences we tested were a general audience, an internal audience, and a business audience. The light blues on the left represent the average scores for the first round of tests, and the dark blue bars represent the average success scores for round 2 after we made changes. Some results were dramatic and others were subtle, but here's the important thing to note about this graph. It only shows success scores. It does not show which version of the website was the easiest and fastest. Notice in the second set of bars here, I just want to point that out, there is a dramatic difference between the round 1 and 2 scores for the internal audience. And this reason for this will be explained more on the next slide. So remember I mentioned that the graph we looked at did not show us if users got lost on the website when completing tasks. Here's a quick visual example of what happened after we did some reorganization. There's a green line, I know it's hard to see on that left one, but there's a green line on both of these pie trees that show how many people went directly down the correct path at some point in their journey. In the round 1 image on the left, the thick gray line shows how users were ignoring the correct path to the rules and policies section in favor of finding all the policy answers under respective topics. But on round 2, the image on the right, we got rid of a whole section, a rules and policies section, and placed those answers where they were actually looking for them in round 1. And this is how we got this big green success path that you can see so clearly on the right chart. So anyway, if that sounded a little gobbledygooky, the biggest takeaway is to remember those user goggles we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. The image on the right is what happens when we listen and observe where users want to go, and then place the content there. So enough about charts and graphs. How does all of this look on a practical level? So why do we title this talk Less is More? Setting up a clear structure that gets users to their destination without choice overload reflects a less is more mindset, which sets everyone up for success. In this example, you'll see it's okay to have a couple of pages linked to the changes in registration page. This is easier for the user than having 3 different changes in registration pages placed throughout the site. It's also easier for the GovHub editors to maintain 1 changes in registration page. And as your website grows, it will be easier to see if pages with duplicate content start creeping in during a site audit. Finally, we come to reorganizing page layouts. Again, less is more here as well. At the individual page level, we organize the sections into 2 sets of pages. The category page offers the biggest picture with the largest variety of information about a group of related topics. For example, the taxes page. The subject page will now show a subsection covering one of the topics on the category page. For example, business taxes. The goal of both of these pages is simply to move the user in the right direction as they need to go more and more specific. The service page includes step-by-step instructions to complete a task. Meanwhile, the detail page provides supplemental details for a service. The purpose of both of those pages is to help the user finally complete their task. For example, choosing and downloading a specific tax form. Overall, at the end of the project, we were happy to see that creating a new structure to present a complex agency's offerings in a streamlined way resulted in a smoother journey for DOR's users. And so now, to answer your questions about the study's impact from DOR's point of view, here is DOR website Katherine Obarowski. Is Katherine here?
Sorry about that.
Oh.
Hi, how are y'all?
Hi, Catherine.
Hi.
Hi, sorry, technical Zoom issues.
No worries.
Deborah Sykes, I thought was going to be presenting a couple of questions for us.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. We do have a question here, and it reads, how many people within DOR are responsible for content management, and what responsibility do each focus on, or how do you divide up the work?
We really only have a handful of people who have actual Drupal access to change or update the pages. Me and a couple of people on the communications team are the only people who are allowed to publish. We have a ticketing process in place that helps people submit requests, and that's working real well for us. For regular maintenance or website content updates, each division is responsible for their own content. I'll try to help them remember to update their content, keep it plain language, and make sure the pages are updated properly to appear as if one person's updating the site. Since I'm the person who publishes, I have the opportunity to review it before it goes on the site. I don't look really hard at PDFs because typically if it's a PDF, it's very specific and it's already gone through its own division approval process. But actual web pages, I do review. And if I have a comment, I'll send it back to the person and say, you know, I think it should say XXX. If it's a really simple change, I can just make it. But usually if it's anything complicated, I'll send it back to the person who submitted it with a comment or a question, and then just, you know, we'll work out what we end up publishing.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that response. The next question is, where or who does your content come from within the agency, and how do you keep it consistent in tone and voice?
Again, the divisions own their content, and we usually work with the subject matter experts, but we tend to take what they say and put it into our language, keep it plain. I'm not an expert on their topic, so I kind of have the advantage of looking at it as a citizen, and I will tell them if I don't understand something or I think it needs to be a little bit more clear. Sometimes, because we are such a broad site, the content, the way they wrote it, is the way it needs to stay because they're speaking to a very narrow group of people who understand their speak. But then other times it needs to be very broad and simple and taught to everyone in the state, like checking your refund status or this surplus refund status. We needed to keep that really simple because everyone is looking for that.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. And let me see here. One final question. How did you decide that you needed usability testing?
That was really a commissioner request. The past commissioner was looking for something in the rules and policies section, and she could not find it. And so we discussed having it be reviewed, and we reached out to digital services for help and guidance. And I was inclined, if we're going to look at that one section, let's look at the whole website. And, you know, we let them go through it for us and take a good look. I'm a little close to the website. I have a hard time seeing it objectively sometimes. It is my baby. So a little nudge is helpful for me to look at things from a different perspective, particularly like the audience segments that we were talking about a minute ago. It seems really obvious, but when you're looking at it every day, you know, it's a little hard to step away from our position on it and look at it as a user.
Okay. And Katherine, if time is permitting, very quickly, Les Thomason has a question. How are you measuring improvement that can be attributed to your site redesign?
In the past, because we haven't completed the whole redesign, so we don't know that right now. But in the past, I do use analytics a lot. So if I make a change that I think is going to shift traffic or make people do something else, I do watch it pretty closely in the analytics and see how they're working through it. And then we also have the call center. So, you know, if we put something bad out there, you hear about it pretty quickly. But, you know, we also can, you know, shift it away from the call center.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your responses. This concludes the Q&A segment.